Have you ever heard a story so chilling it sent shivers down your spine? A tale so terrifying that it kept you awake at night? Well, get ready, because these are the scariest stories you've ever heard. But before we dive in, I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable? Or maybe you have a creepy story of your own. Let me know, and feel free to suggest what you want to hear next. It was a quiet, moonless night when Sarah and her friends decided to explore the old abandoned house on the edge of town. They had heard the rumors. People said that it was haunted, that strange things happened there, but they didn't believe in such things. The house creaked and groaned under the weight of years of neglect. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs filled the corners. As they walked through the long, narrow hallways, their flashlights flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Then they heard it, a soft, almost inaudible sound, like the scratching of nails against wood. At first, they thought it was the wind or the old house settling, but then the sound grew louder. It wasn't just scratching now, it was banging. They froze, hearts pounding, listening intently. The sound came from upstairs. One of them, feeling brave, whispered, "Let's check it out." Reluctantly, the group made their way up the stairs, each step making the floorboards creak louder than before. When they reached the top, the noise stopped. Dead silence. As they stood in the dark hallway, a door at the end creaked open by itself. They could feel a chill in the air, and their breaths became visible. One of the girls stepped forward and slowly walked to the door. Inside, there was nothing. Just a dusty old room, empty except for a single rocking chair by the window. It was moving slowly back and forth, though there was no breeze. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. The room went pitch black. They fumbled to turn on their flashlights, but nothing worked. That's when they heard it, a low, guttural voice, right behind them. "Leave now." They didn't need another warning. They ran out of the house as fast as they could, never looking back. They never spoke about it again, but the feeling that something followed them out of that house haunted them for years. Jake had always loved hiking, but one trail, deep in the woods, had always made him uneasy. It was an old path that not many people took, but there was something about it that seemed off. One day, after convincing himself that there was nothing to be afraid of, he decided to take the trail. As he ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew colder and the sounds of nature grew quieter. The only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath his boots. He reached a small clearing, and in the middle of it, there was an old tree stump. At first, it seemed like any other stump, but as Jake got closer, he saw that something was carved into it. Words. The carving read, "They're watching you." He laughed it off, thinking it was just some prank or joke. But as he turned to leave, he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. A figure, standing far off in the trees, watching him. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know why, but the way it stood there unmoving made his skin crawl. He began to walk faster, but the figure seemed to be moving with him, staying just far enough away that he couldn't make out its features. As he quickened his pace, so did it. Finally, Jake broke into a run, not daring to look back. He ran until he stumbled out of the woods, gasping for air. When he turned to look at the forest behind him, the figure was gone. But on the tree stump, another message had appeared. "Next time, we won't be so far away." Lena had always been fond of old, strange books. One day, while browsing through a secondhand bookstore, she found a dusty, leather-bound book hidden in the back of a shelf. It was ancient, the cover cracked and worn, but there was something about it that drew her in. She opened the book, and as she skimmed through the pages, she noticed that the text seemed to be in a language she couldn't understand. But the more she read, the more she felt like the words were starting to make sense. That night, as she sat in her room reading, she felt a sudden cold draft. She looked up from the book and saw a shadow moving across the wall. It was too large to be hers. She quickly closed the book and tried to shake off the eerie feeling. But the shadow moved again, this time closer. It was as if something was creeping around her room, watching her. Terrified, she looked at the book again. The pages had changed. The words were now in English, and they read, "You are not alone." Lena felt her heart race as she heard a whisper, soft but clear. Put the book down, but she couldn't. The book seemed to hold her in its grasp, drawing her deeper into its pages. She tried to toss it aside, but it wouldn't leave her hands. And then the door creaked open and a cold, unearthly voice said, "You've read too far." A man named Paul moved into an old house on the outskirts of town, hoping for a fresh start. The house was beautiful, with big windows and a spacious yard. But there was one thing that unsettled him: the mirror in the hallway. It was an antique, framed with dark wood, and it felt out of place in the otherwise modern house. One night, after a long day, Paul went to bed early. As he was drifting off to sleep, he heard the soft sound of footsteps outside his door. He assumed it was just the house settling, but the footsteps grew louder, closer. Then he heard a knock on the door. Slowly, he got up and opened it, but there was no one there. Confused, Paul walked down the hall and stopped in front of the mirror. His reflection wasn't quite right. The figure in the mirror was standing still, staring at him with an intense gaze. But Paul could see his own reflection, moving on its own, as if he was being controlled. Suddenly, the reflection reached out of the mirror and grabbed him. Paul screamed, trying to break free, but it was no use. The mirror pulled him closer, and in an instant, he was sucked into it. The next morning, Paul's house was silent. The mirror, however, reflected an empty room, save for one thing: Paul's face, still staring back from within the glass. Samantha had always been skeptical of the supernatural. She never believed in ghosts or spirits. But everything changed when she moved into her new apartment. At first, everything seemed normal. The apartment was cozy, a perfect little place for her. But soon, strange things started happening. Doors would open on their own, lights would flicker, and sometimes she would hear soft whispers in the dark. One night, after a long day at work, Samantha went to bed, feeling exhausted. She closed her eyes, but the whispering kept her awake. It was faint, but it sounded like someone was speaking just outside her room. She sat up, looking around, but no one was there. The whispering grew louder, more distinct. It was coming from the closet. Summoning all her courage, she stood up and slowly walked toward the closet. As she opened the door, the whispers stopped. But something caught her eye, a small, dusty box hidden in the back corner of the closet. She opened the box, and inside was a note. The note simply read, "I'm still here." The door slammed shut behind her, and the whispering returned, this time louder, as if it was all around her. And then a voice, clear as day, whispered in her ear, "I never left." These stories are meant to send chills down your spine. But do you have any creepy experiences of your own? Drop them in the comments below, and let's see how many more terrifying tales we can share together.